put us all on the map.
Oh man, Pac-Man, that's my boy right there, man.
And he said, Naheem, did you ever think you would be on the same field as AP? And my answer was literally hell no.
Nobody tell me what I ain't gonna be no more.
Hey, even to this day, OJ don't want no problem.
OJ, that's my dog though, man. For real. Respect.
Hello, and welcome into another edition of the Sideline Story Podcast. I'm Cody Perdue.
And I'm Will Richardson.
And we are pleased to bring you into our 8th episode of the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by the good folks at TGK Athletics. The TGK Grind Lab is Maine's #1 training facility for youth athletes specializing in both football and basketball. Visit tgkathletics.com or download the TGK app for more info. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce, and someone I know all Panthers fans are familiar with, the voice of the Carolina Panthers himself, Mr. Mick Mixon.
What's up, fellas?
How you doing today, Mick? How you doing?
I appreciate Cody introducing me as the voice of the Panthers. That's an honor, but I've had people come up to me many times and say, son, it's a good thing you're not the face of the Panthers or we'd all be in a lot of trouble.
Oh, man.
That's dope. That's dope. Yeah, I'm pretty sure all the Panther fans, they much rather have you as a commentator, but hey, Mick, hey, we all don't get the beauty, my man.
Well, that's true, and genetics is such an unfair science. There's no better example of that than your humble correspondent. I'm basically nobody. I've never made a tackle. I've never scored a touchdown, but I believe stridently that broadcasters are the conduit through which notoriety should travel.
Yep.
So it's been a wild ride. I'm 61 and a half years old. I can see both you young guys on my screen. I can tell you're both green as a gourd, and you got all your life, all your career out in front of you. So I appreciate you having a senior citizen moment here on your podcast.
Nah, Mick, you're actually the man, yo. I've literally came up, I went to NC State. Can't say that I followed the school that you used to commentate for, but I can honestly say that I've been a big fan of you and just everything that you brought and the fun that you brought to the game of football through commentating and just sports analysis itself. To another note, Mick, just talk to us some about what's been going on with your job and how's COVID-19 affected it, and what's been the hardest part about your job with everything that's going on?
Appreciate it, Will. My dad went to NC State. He was a chemical engineer. He loved the Wolfpack. And Tony Haynes, who's the color analyst on the State Network, is one of my best friends in the industry. So I'm one of these guys. I grew up in North Carolina. I'm one of these guys. I mean, I went to UNC. But I went to basketball camp at Duke when I was a boy and kind of followed NC State because of my pop. And I'm an ACC guy. I used to work at Wake Forest for a hot minute, teaching a couple classes there. So I love the Atlantic Coast Conference. And hardest part of the gig, I think, for me, fellas, is just the isolation. Now, I am married to 5 feet of hell, and she's the most beautiful woman in America. I will show her to you if she walks by. But so I love spending time with Dawn. I call her Dawnie, but Dawnie and I have had a great time hanging out. But if I could take you to the stadium, my office at Bank of America Stadium is right near a drink machine, a coffee machine, a microwave, the refrigerator, that area where if the coaches run out of creamer down on their side, they constantly are walking right past my door. So I've had this fertile stream in which to throw my lure and get information. I talk to you right now almost totally clueless about what the 2020 Carolina Panthers are going to look like. Now, I've tried to do the best I can on podcasts and the internet, and I've started working on started making my little index cards here in a variety of colors to sort of get into the names and numbers, but cannot wait to get back in action to try to find out some things and fill in some blanks.
For sure. So just being away from the football life is just kind of just been the hardest part for you, being away from the football life and just your norm.
It's one of the great joys of my life is that I have a vocation that's also my avocation. Yes, sir. I have never. I mean, I got friends that have out earned me 10-1 when we graduated college. I'm out there broadcasting American Legion baseball, dirt track car racing, Pop Warner football. church league softball, doesn't matter. And I'm making no money. I'm trying to sell ads to get sponsors from this little radio station. Now, you guys are sponsored. Who's our fine sponsor here? Athletics, TGK Athletics?
Yes, sir. It's TGK Athletics.
And
well, that's outstanding.
Yep.
Yes, sir. And we also have a sponsorship with Manscaped. It's below the belt grooming for men. So
Manscaped.com.
They contacted me. Manscaped contacted me. Their people reached out. They wanted me to be the before picture.
Okay.
In some of their advertising.
The before picture.
Yeah, we're still negotiating on some trademarking and some branding, but I think it's got a chance. The deal's got a chance.
Okay, that's dope though. That's dope. That's dope.
But what I was telling was I've never felt like I had a job. I've always felt like being at work has been fun. It's been a joy. It's been an honor. There's 100 talented people within 100 miles of here that could do that could put their mark on it, that could do a good job announcing this. It's something that I've just always, ever since I was a little Mickey Mixon growing up in Chapel Hill, it's all I ever wanted to be, was a sports broadcaster.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's crazy because you saying that reminds me a lot of Cody, just his knowledge of the game, love for the game, and not just football, but just of every sport, and just his will to learn about it. I can't say Cody really is. I can see him being a broadcaster in his future, and I definitely could see myself doing it as well. It's always been a dream job for me. But I can say one thing about Cody: he's really, really, really a lot like you when it comes to knowing his specifics and following up on players and just for his love of sports.
I used to I wondered, Cody, a long time growing up, why my parents drank so much during my adolescence and young adulthood. And I used to think it was their fault, but I later realized it was probably me doing the constant play-by-play out loud of everything I ever did, every golf shot I ever hit, every basket I made out in the backyard, every bite of dinner I ever took. I just kept a running commentary. So I'm sure I'm the reason why they turned to small molecules.
I can definitely relate to that, man. Just running different scenarios inside of my head, pretending I'm on ESPN when I'm playing in the backyard, things like that. Like, I'm always coming up to Will like, hey, did you see this with so-and-so? Did you see what Mike Golick said? Did you see what Stephen A said? And we're just always bouncing ideas off of his head. And he's probably sitting there like, does this guy do anything else besides watch sports?
Yeah.
Who are your favorites, and Will too? Who are some guys you and women too that you guys enjoy following?
I like the Dan Le Batard show just because it gives you a different spin. Those guys are funny. I like Dan Le Batard. Obviously, Stephen A is like the icon that, you see his face plastered everywhere on TV screens. And I like Golick and Wingo, and also Golick Jr.
Yeah, I'd have to say for me, definitely the old, just waking up at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., just hearing Mike and Mike in the morning, just arguing with each other, going back and forth. So, yeah, Mike Golick and Greenberg, that would definitely have to be my two favorites. Just from as a child, just waking up, and I remember I hear one talk, and they kind of had like similar voices to me, and they'll be arguing 1 minute, and then they're friends the next minute, and then they're just talking about all these different things. It remind me a lot about Cody, and how he will always just talk to me about things. So I'd say Mike and Mike for sure, and definitely Stephen A. Who can't say Stephen A? Just listening to him just make other people mad sometimes is fun to listen to. So
he talks with such speech, with such pitch variation, with such emphasis, with such a vocal. It's so intoxicating the way he's one of those guys. I feel like he could be reading a phone book to you, and you'd still want to listen, but just because of the confidence that he puts his opinions out there.
You think it's a story.
Truly, you do. And I was 21 years old when ESPN signed on. Maybe I was 20, about to turn 21 in 1979 when ESPN first signed on. We were lucky. We had cable. So I remember George Grant and Lee Leonard behind this cheap-looking, looked good to me at the time, but this hokey-looking ESPN logo they had. And they said, from now on, this is the epicenter of sports television in the United States. And that was kind of a joke back then because, who thought the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, they're broadcasting Australian rules football, rodeo, rugby. I mean, they're just trying to fill airtime. But it turned out to be prophetic, and I'm so glad I was born when I was.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess my next, getting into UNC just a little bit, I have a few questions for you about just your broadcasting time there. Just tell us and tell the fans just some of your best moments for UNC. Like when you think back to your time broadcasting at UNC at the college level, just talk about some of the best moments that you had doing it.
Getting to know Woody Durham, legendary broadcaster, working alongside of him, I could fill a small book with what I learned from working with the Woodman. Woody was superstitious, and so I used to have a good time messing around with him. You guys both know in life, whoever cares less controls the relationship. So if Woody's superstitious, if he thinks there are metaphysical forces at work in the universe that will conspire to have NC State beat the Tar Heels if Woody doesn't have his lucky pin or my necktie has red in it or anything like that, then you can kind of control the relationship. So I used to have a good time working with Woody. Woody used to get criticized for having enthusiastic calls when the other team did something good. This is what Woody believed. He believed that the game deserved that. He believed that the game, these athletes, the coaches, the sponsors, deserve some journalistic balance. He, of course, saved his most exciting calls and his highest vocal register for when North Carolina did well. But I just loved the way Woody approached it and the consistency of his preparation. I was there for Mac Brown's second year. I started in 89. I saw Mac Brown's second 1-10 and how he built that program. Dean Smith was already one of the most powerful people in the state of North Carolina when I started working there. He could get governor on the phone, lieutenant governor, he could get anybody hired, probably get about any bill passed, anything done he wanted to back then. And it was fun to be a small part of the team of people that covered UNC basketball. And I learned a lot. I was just a kid in a lot of ways. I had no filter. I would say almost anything on the air. It got me in a lot of trouble, but I enjoyed it.
For sure. So was it a big difference for you just to like commentating for basketball and football? Like talk about that some.
I believe when I first started at UNC, I'd been in minor league baseball. I'd been at AAA, and my goal was to go to the major leagues if I could. But my boss at AAA lost his team in court. The main guides became the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons. And so I was kind of out of work for a little bit, and I got a letter out of the blue from Jim Hebner of the Tar Heel Sports Network asking me would I consider coming back to Chapel Hill and working on those broadcasts. My goal was to only do that for 1 year and then to get back into baseball. But that summer I'd only been back in Chapel Hill for a couple of weeks when my parents were killed in a commercial airline crash. My life kind of got put in a blender and hit on the puree button for a while. Years went by, time went by. I don't want any. I'm just telling you this because this is part of why I ended up staying in Chapel Hill. My parents died at 57 and 54, but they had a great, great life, and they were amazing people. They parented my sister and me to be independent and self-reliant. But I believed when I came to UNC as a color analyst that there's nothing worse than a color man or color woman that doesn't understand the playing rules, that doesn't understand the language of the game, the syntax, the nomenclature, the strategies. So I tried to immerse myself. I'd never played. I wasn't lucky enough to have been gifted genetically to have scored a touchdown or run through the papier-mâché logo at my high school and out onto the field. I was in the press box. That was my theater. That was my arena. But I went to the ACC Football Rules Clinic. I tried to ask 1,000 questions a day of the coaches to say, okay, why do you think this way? What are your philosophies? And what do you believe offensively, defensively? Where are the strategic matchups? Where does this team give North Carolina problems? What do you think you might be able to exploit? And I just tried to educate myself before every broadcast because I was fearful of something happening that I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm. Sure. That's awesome. And I think because, I'm a high school coach, so it's neat that you speak about that preparation and being prepared going in, having your I's dotted, T's crossed. And also just as a viewer, I feel the same way. Like there's nothing worse than when I'm watching my favorite team play and you hear an analyst say